Thandiwe was a young woman full of hope when she married into the wealthy Mabunda family in Kasama, Zambia. She believed she was stepping into a life of love and respect, but soon her dreams began to fade. Instead of being treated like a wife, she became more like a servant in her own home. No one called her Thandiwe anymore. They just called her the girl who cleans. Every day she woke up early to mop the shiny marble floors, clean the big kitchen, and pick up after everyone. Her sister-in-law, Mfatso, was especially cruel. She would leave dirty clothes everywhere, throw tantrums, and expect Thandiwe to clean up after her like a maid. Thandiwe worked quietly, with no thanks, no love, and no rest, for 6 long years. Not once did her husband stand up for her. The rich Mabunda home looked perfect from the outside, but inside, Thandiwe was trapped, cleaning a house where no one truly saw her. She cried in silence, but still, she kept working, hoping that one day something would change. Even though Thandiwe was married, she was never truly treated like a wife. In the big, beautiful Mabunda mansion, there were many rooms, guest rooms, a study, even rooms that were never used. But Thandiwe was told to sleep in the storage room. It was a small, dusty space in the back of the house, packed with old boxes, broken chairs, and cleaning supplies. There was barely enough room to stretch her legs at night. Sometimes rats would crawl around. The air smelled like bleach and dust. Her mother-in-law, Yolanda, told her it was tradition that a new wife should stay there until she earned her place. But deep inside, Thandiwe knew that wasn't true. It wasn't about culture or tradition. It was about power, and it was about something even worse: betrayal. Her husband, Chanda, was hardly around. When he did come home, he barely looked at her. He slept in the master bedroom alone and never invited her in. Thandiwe tried to talk to him, to ask what was wrong, but he would just shrug and walk away. Over time, she noticed small things: a woman's perfume on his shirt, late-night phone calls he took outside, messages on his phone he quickly deleted when she entered the room. It all began to make sense. Chanda had gone back to his ex-girlfriend, the same woman he once claimed was out of his life. The rest of the family knew. That's why they treated Thandiwe like she was temporary, like she didn't matter. They never let her be a part of family meetings, and she was never invited when guests came over. At mealtimes, she sat alone in the kitchen, while the others laughed and dined at the large table in the dining room. Thandiwe wasn't just lonely, she was invisible. Sometimes, she would hear Yolanda whispering to Mfatso, laughing behind her back. She thought marrying into money would make her someone, Yolanda said one evening, not knowing Thandiwe was nearby. She's just good for cleaning. Mfatso would roll her eyes and throw her dirty laundry on the floor, expecting Thandiwe to pick it up like always. They didn't care how tired she was, or if she was sick. Thandiwe once had a fever, and still had to mop the floor while Mfatso scrolled on her phone, sipping fresh juice. Not once did anyone ask if she needed help. Not once did anyone say thank you. Even worse, her husband had become a stranger. He didn't ask how her day was, didn't notice her pain, and never said he loved her. On their anniversary, he didn't even come home. That night, Thandiwe sat alone in the storage room, holding the wedding photo they once took with smiling faces. She looked at it for a long time, then quietly put it back in the box under her small bed. The photo didn't show the truth anymore. It showed a lie. Sometimes, at night, she would cry quietly, so no one could hear her. But in those dark, quiet hours, something inside her began to change. The sadness didn't go away, but it turned into something stronger. She started to dream of a different life. Not a rich life, not a perfect life, just a free life. One where she could be herself again, where she didn't feel small, where her name wasn't the girl who cleans, but simply Thandiwe, the girl who loved to write, the girl who once dreamed of running her own business, the girl who was more than just someone's burden. So, late at night, after all the chores were done and the house went quiet, Thandiwe would take out an old phone she had hidden in her suitcase. It had a cracked screen, and the battery didn't last long, but it worked just enough for her to use the internet. She started watching videos, free lessons on business, and even joined a few online classes. She wrote notes in a small notebook using a pencil so she could erase and reuse pages. No one in the house knew. While they slept peacefully, she was building something, quietly, slowly, secretly. Each lesson gave her hope. Each new idea reminded her that she still had a future. Her past didn't have to define her. Every night, she learned more. How to write a business plan, how to speak to clients, how to turn pain into purpose. Her tiny storage room became more than just a place of tears. It became a quiet classroom where a broken heart was learning how to heal and grow. She didn't tell anyone what she was doing, not Chanda, not Yolanda, not even her own family back home. It was her secret, a little flame of hope in a cold, empty house. And though the world around her still treated her like she didn't matter, Thandiwe began to believe in herself again. She didn't have a room of her own, but in her mind, she was already building a world where she would finally belong, a world where she could say no and walk away, a world where she would never ever let anyone treat her like this again. One evening, after a long day of endless cleaning, Thandiwe was wiping the big dining room floor like she always did. Her hands were sore and her back hurt, but she didn't stop. The same old wooden mop she had used for years was now weak and cracked, but it was all she had. As she pushed it across the shiny floor, it suddenly snapped in half with a loud crack. Thandiwe froze, holding the two broken pieces in her hands. It was such a small thing, just a mop. But in that moment, it felt like something much bigger had broken too. She quietly walked to the kitchen, where Yolanda and Mafatso were sitting. Her voice was soft but clear as she asked, "The mop broke. Can I please get a new one?" Yolanda didn't even look up. She slammed her cup on the table and shouted, "Why would we buy anything for a burden like you?" Her voice was sharp, full of anger and disgust. Mfatso laughed and picked up a dirty kitchen towel. Without warning, she threw it straight at Thandiwe's face. The towel was wet and smelly and it hit her like a slap. Thandiwe stood there, stunned. Her heart was racing. Her eyes were wide with shock. Something inside her snapped, not loudly, not like the mop, but quietly, deep in her soul. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just stood still, holding the dirty towel in her hands. That small act of disrespect, that one moment of cruelty, became the final straw. All the pain, the years of silence, the humiliation, the loneliness, it all came crashing down in that second. For 6 years, she had cleaned, cooked, and suffered in silence. She had begged for love. She had prayed for change. But now something was different. Something inside her was awake. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat on her small bed in the storage room, the broken mop beside her. She kept thinking about everything, the shouting, the towel, the years of being invisible. Over and over, Yolanda's words rang in her ears. A burden like you. But Thandiwe was not a burden. She was not useless. She had dreams. She had talent. She had power. They just didn't want her to see it. But now she did. For hours, she stared at the ceiling, remembering her secret studies, the business videos she had watched, the plans she had written down in her little notebook. Her dreams weren't small. They were just hidden. Until now, around 4 a.m., while everyone in the house was still asleep, Thandiwe quietly got out of bed. She moved slowly, not making a sound. She packed her few clothes into a small bag. She added her journal, her notes, and the broken mop handle, a reminder of everything she had survived. She looked around the room one last time. No tears, no goodbyes, just peace. She had nothing, but at the same time, she had everything she needed. A dream, a plan, and finally, a voice. She opened the door and stepped out into the cold morning air. The sky was still dark, but a soft wind touched her face, almost like the world was whispering, "Go." She didn't look back. She didn't need to. That chapter was over. She had stayed silent for too long, but now she was ready to be heard. Every step she took was slow but strong. Her heart beat fast, but it wasn't from fear. It was from freedom. For the first time in 6 years, Thandiwe felt light, not because her bag was empty, but because her soul was no longer carrying the weight of silence. She didn't know exactly where she was going. She didn't have a car or much money, or anyone waiting to help, but she had herself, and that was finally enough. Her journey had begun. The broken mop wasn't just a cleaning tool anymore. It was a symbol of how much she had given, how much she had endured, and how she finally chose herself. In that quiet morning, while the city of Kasama still slept, a new Thandiwe was born, one who would no longer beg for respect, one who would build her own table instead of waiting for a seat. She walked into the unknown with nothing but hope in her heart, and a dream that couldn't be broken, not even by a snapped mop, a cruel word, or a thrown towel. The silence was over, and her story was just beginning. At 4 a.m., while the house was still dark and silent, Thandiwe opened her eyes. Her heart was calm, her mind clear. This was the moment she had been quietly waiting for. She moved slowly, carefully, not wanting to wake anyone. There were no tears, no second thoughts. She took her small bag from under the bed and began to pack. There wasn't much, just a few old clothes, a worn-out pair of shoes, and her journal filled with notes, ideas, and quiet dreams. She didn't bother writing a goodbye letter. She knew no one in that house would miss her. They never really saw her anyway. But what she carried that no one could see was her secret, the one she had held close for years. While the Mabunda family slept, she had been learning. Every night after cleaning and cooking, she stayed awake, watching videos on her cracked phone, reading articles, and joining free online classes. She was not just sweeping floors, she was building something, bit by bit. In the silence of the storage room, Thandiwe had been studying business, learning how to register a company, talk to customers, manage money, and one day run her own team. No one knew. Not Chanda, not Yolanda, not even Mafatso, who mocked her daily. They thought she was weak. They thought she was stuck. But Thandiwe had been planning her way out all along. She had no money, no car, and no family in Lusaka. But she had belief in herself, and that belief was stronger than anything they ever tried to break in her. She stepped out of the storage room for the last time and didn't look back. The cold morning air hit her face as she walked out the gate in silence. Not a single person in the house noticed. They wouldn't even know she was gone until much later. And when they did, they would probably think she went back to her village in shame. But Thandiwe wasn't running away. She was stepping into her future. Each step she took in the dark was a step toward the life she had always dreamed of. She knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be days when she'd be tired, hungry, or unsure of what to do next. But she had already survived the hardest part, being unloved and unseen. Now, she was ready to be more than just the girl who cleans. She was ready to be her own boss, to help other women like her, and to create something powerful from the pain she had lived through. Thandiwe didn't need applause or attention. All she needed was a chance, and she had just taken it. 2 years had passed since Thandiwe walked out of the Mabunda mansion in silence. The girl who once lived in a storage room, mopped marble floors, and cried quietly at night had changed. She was no longer the same. Life hadn't been easy, but step by step, she had rebuilt herself. She started small, cleaning a few homes by herself in Lusaka, using her notebook full of ideas and knowledge she had gathered during those long nights back in the Mabunda house. She saved every kwacha she earned. She worked long hours, walking to homes with her small bag of cleaning tools, sometimes skipping meals just to save money. But she was focused. She had a bigger plan. Soon, she hired one woman to help her, a single mother who had been kicked out by her husband and had no place to go. Thandiwe didn't just give her a job. She gave her hope. Then she hired another woman, and another. Every one of them had a story. Women who had been ignored, hurt, and treated like they were nothing. Thandiwe welcomed them all. She taught them how to clean professionally, how to treat clients, how to speak with confidence, and most importantly, how to believe in themselves again. She called the company Silence No More. It wasn't just a cleaning service. It was a movement, a mission, a voice for women who had been silent for too long. Silence No More quickly became known across Lusaka and even back in Kasama. People loved how professional the service was. Clients saw something different in the women who worked there. Strength, pride, unity. The staff always showed up on time, dressed in neat uniforms with the logo "Silence No More" stitched proudly on the front. They smiled, they worked hard, and they supported one another like sisters. And then the media noticed. News channels and radio stations began talking about this new company, run by women, for women. People were shocked to learn that the CEO, the woman behind it all, was Thandiwe Mabunda, the same woman who used to be called the girl who cleans. But now, she was the one giving orders. She was the one creating jobs. She was the one making change. Thandiwe stood tall in her office, dressed in a simple but sharp black suit, her hair tied neatly, her eyes calm and confident. Her name was no longer whispered in pity. It was spoken with respect. She made sure her company paid well. All her workers received fair wages, enough to support their children, pay rent, and walk with dignity. No woman in Silence No More would ever sleep in a storage room again. No one would be told they were a burden. Thandiwe made sure of that. She had lived that life. She knew the pain, and now she used her success to lift others out of it. She also started offering weekend classes for the women, teaching them skills beyond cleaning, communication, money management, even basic computer training. She told them, "You may be holding a mop today, but tomorrow you could be holding your own business plan. Never forget that." Her words stuck with them. The company didn't just clean homes. It cleaned away the shame that so many women had been forced to carry. Within 2 years, Silence No More became one of the most trusted cleaning services in the city. People wanted more than just clean homes. They wanted to support a cause. Thandiwe received awards, was invited to speak at events, and even mentored young girls who dreamed of starting their own businesses. But even with all the attention, she remained humble. She still walked through the office, spoke to every worker, listened to their stories, and reminded them they were not alone. What made Silence No More so powerful wasn't just the service, it was the story. People saw themselves in Thandiwe's journey. Women who had been silenced for years began to speak up. Girls who had once been afraid to dream now dared to believe in a better life. And the city of Lusaka watched as a quiet woman from a storage room became a symbol of strength. Thandiwe didn't build her company with money. She built it with pain, with patience, and with purpose. And now her voice echoed through every home her team walked into. The girl who once cleaned floors now cleaned the path for others to rise. And the world was finally listening. One hot afternoon in Lusaka, Yolanda Mabunda sat nervously in her big living room. Her once proud home was now full of trouble. She was getting letters from the government, labour complaints, unpaid taxes, warnings she didn't understand. Her staff had quit. The place was a mess, and officials were asking questions she couldn't answer. In panic, Yolanda searched online for the best cleaning and compliance service in the city. One name kept popping up: Silence No More. Everyone said they were professional, quick, and discreet. Desperate, Yolanda called the number without thinking twice. The next day the doorbell rang. Yolanda opened the door, expecting a regular cleaner. But there stood Thandiwe, wearing a sharp black suit, heels clicking on the tile floor, and a quiet confidence in her eyes. Her hair was neat, her expression calm. For a moment, Yolanda couldn't speak. Her mouth opened slightly, and the phone in her hand dropped to the floor with a soft thud. She blinked, confused and embarrassed. This couldn't be the same Thandiwe she once forced to sleep in a storage room. Thandiwe stepped forward slowly, still smiling. She looked around the house, then gently said, "This time, I won't be cleaning. I'll be watching how clean you really are." Her voice was steady, not angry, just honest. Yolanda couldn't move. All she could do was stare, speechless. Thandiwe didn't come with revenge. She came with power. The same woman they once called a burden was now the CEO of the company they needed. The tables had turned, and this time, Thandiwe was standing tall.